So first of all, I wanted to thank Venue.live for hosting this event with us. They graciously um, given us the right to use their software to host this event. So thank you for that. And we're going to be talking, both Julien and I, in this webinar. Maybe I can present myself, and then Julien, you can present yourself. So I'm Sydney Cohen, CTO and co-founder of Axolo. I've built Axolo with Arthur 2 years ago, and now we have more than 1,000 developers using us every day, and that's it. Julien.
Cool. Yep. So I'm Julien. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mergify. I'm a software engineer. Before being a CEO, I spent like 25 years doing open source development. I don't know, and a lot of different projects over the last 25 years. And I started Mergify 5 years ago now with my co-founder Mehdi, which I met building open source stuff basically. And we are trying to automate work and CI jobs for software engineering team for the last few years.
Cool. Thank you. So let's first talk about pull request best practice and AI, and then we'll talk about the bottlenecks and about each of our solution. So maybe we can start by talking about this. So this is the topics we're going to cover, and Julien is going to start and tell us why you should do code reviews.
Yeah, it's like it's a very long list. There's a lot of things you should do for doing good PRs, I think. So code reviews is one of the first things. So it's weird to still talk about code reviews, I think, because it seems to me everybody does this, but I still meet teams and people that have zero or close to zero code reviews. So do code reviews. So I mean, it's really sounds obvious, but yes, it does improve code quality overall. Like you have your colleagues, like I mean, first do your own your own code reviews. Like this morning, I reviewed a PR from a colleague, and it was obvious they did not review their own PR before sending it. Like there was a huge print statement, for debugging in the middle of the code, so they did not review their own PR. So do that first, and then ask at least one pair of eyes to look at your code with a different angle. That's how it works. Like humans, we all have our own brains. They work differently, so use another brain to review your code. It's also a good opportunity to share the knowledge. If you only are the only one always working on the same piece of code, um, not wishing anything bad happens to you for sure, but you never know. And if nobody else had any chance to look at the code ever, it's very hard for anyone knowing what's happening in some part of the code. And the more you grow, and the more it's very important to have this. At least one pair of eyes helps with spreading the knowledge. The bigger your team is, the more eyes you could ask to review your code. I mean, having too many people to review before merging is also not a good idea because it's going to slow down your process. My rule of thumb is to having two pairs of eyes, basically two other people from your team. There are a lot of different schemes you could use. For example, I think Google is famous for that, where there are like two different people need to review your code, but they're from different areas. For example, somebody's going to be a system expert, somebody that really knows the code very well, and another person is going to be a language expert. For example, if you write code in a PR in Python, you will need somebody that knows what does the code functionally and somebody that really knows well Python to approve the code. So you have your two brains that has to review your code. There are other ways to doing that. Basically, build that the way depending on your team size, all of that. But that's very important. It's also a very good example, a good way to lead by example, to mentor other people if you have juniors in your team, for example. It's a very good excuse to do that. It's a good opportunity to share best practice, all of that. So, thumbs up to code reviews, basically.
Cool. I agree. By the way, if anybody has any questions or any reactions, feel free to ask them in the chat. So during code reviews, you should also have small and focused pull requests. I put this screenshot of I am a developer but I think it illustrates well. 10 line of code, usually you get 10 issues, and 500 line of codes, people would just say, looks fine. They can't bother to look at the code because it's way too long, and they don't want to get too much into it.
So I think that's a good
And I think
excuse to write very long PR, right? Because nobody looks at your code and you can merge anything if you write very long PR, right?
definitely you can get it much faster. Yeah, it's quicker to review when you have a small pull request. I've read somewhere that in the first hour you usually get 90% of the feedback. So when you have a small PR, it's usually much easier to get someone to review your code. It's also faster to merge because it changes less things in the code. It's easier to track each release, and it improve the quality overall. And I don't know if most of you are familiar with stack pull request, but this is a process that allows you to, when you have a more complex code change, you can stack pull request. So each change, you can make it a single pull request that is going to be reviewed. And you have a few tools that allow you to do that, but with the basic functionality of Git, you can do that.
Yeah, one thing I
And I
think
see.
you did not mention on that, it's also very easy to revert. Like if you have small PR that breaks something, it's really easy to revert a small PR. When you have a huge PR where you don't really know where the problem is, you revert the whole thing and you have to go way back when you revert the whole thing. When it's small, it's really easy and fast to do that usually.
Definitely, yeah. Rollback. It's a great point. And I see that Aaron said that somebody loses context after 400 line of codes, and I kind of agree with that. And we have a question: how do you approach first pull request in terms of its size? I'm not sure I understand this question.
What's first pull request exactly? So, when the
When the
request,
repo is empty.
it's like bootstrapping your project. Like what's a good size of the first PR?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it really depends on what you're trying to build. So it's hard to answer exactly. But if you can, like, I don't know, I'm in a startup, so I'm like build an MVP. So do very small project and very small PR. Don't try to build something that doesn't work out of the box. So I would go with still small PR, and try to build all of that. And I think if you build something from scratch, the point is like I include tests, CI, all of that from the beginning, even maybe code reviews if you have a team, even if you're only two people, it's enough to do code reviews and build that way. It's not an excuse to do like a huge code dump of 2,000 lines because the way you work is that usually you don't write 2,000 lines of a code in a day unless you're generating code with GPT or whatever. So if you have that process of thoughts, basically where you layer things day after day, well, you can actually reflect that in Git. So there's no excuse, I think, to not do small PR every day, multiple days, depending on what you're building.
Code owner, you want to talk about this, Julien?
Sure. Yeah, code owner. I think that's relates to reviews also a bit. So if you don't have code ownership, so you have to have. I mean, at some point, I think it builds organically. The more code you have, the more people are going to spend time in some part of the code. Like if you take, I don't know, a huge code base like the Linux kernel, you can't know everything. Maybe Linux does, but can't know every part of the code. So you have this kind of ownership that builds over time, and I think it's important to recognize that you have to have ownership and that people are not just transferable from one piece of code and the other. That's where, like I was mentioning, the Google review system, when they use this kind of language expert, system expert, you have to have this kind of team built into your code base where, some people know better this part of the code, some people know better this other part of the code. And that's important to build your review workflow. So you're not going to ask a random developer to read the code, otherwise they're just going to do, like your example you were giving, Sydney, like it's like, sure, might work. I don't know. It looks good. So I don't really understand what it does. So you don't want these people to review the code. There's no value in that. There's very little value in that. So you want to be sure that people build the code, they own it, they can review the code, and they are accountable for it. If there's a problem in the code, they're going to maintain it. If you don't do that, you will end up with not necessarily related to the PR workflow, but you will end up with code that has a lot of technical depth, basically, that you will have to solve at some point. There is no owner, nobody will take care of solving the debt, and you will have people just adding more and more like spaghetti code or whatever on top of the code. And so it's important to recognize that some people are okay maintaining that and building this kind of, we said island, but not like silos, but people can go into your code, but they have to really be aware that this is their responsibility to use, to take care of this code, to review the code and all of that.
And this is something you can automate easily. You can add a code owner file to your Git project and have code owners be added for every single pull request automatically. And this is something that we do, and I found it very practical. Linter, it's a very good practice. So what does a linter does? It check for like it's a rule generation on your code, so it will check for like common errors that it can check automatically. And the way I suggest that you implement it is for every time you commit, it checks if you can commit if there is no errors. So in the first screenshot on the right, you can see that it's ESLint on JavaScript, and it checks for guidelines like code guidelines. And I can see there's 2 errors here. For example, there's a variable that has been assigned a value but that has never been used. It's really interesting because sometimes it allows me to not push bugs in production. It allows for consistency and automated code reviews. It's also a very good educational tool because sometimes you do things in your code and ESLint will like tells you, oh, you shouldn't do this, and you can look at the problem and see why this is a problem. For example, I made this error where in a for loop I made a wait. I was just waiting for a synchronous function, and it tells me why this is a problem. And I remember having a discussion with you, Julien. I think it was probably at the very beginning when we started Axolo, like 2.5 years ago. In code reviews, you shouldn't have people telling you how to have your code, but the linter should tell you. So if you have like specific guidelines that you have.
Exactly. I mean, most linters, they are very customizable. Like ESLint, for example, you can write your custom rules. So rather than repeating yourself in code reviews, like you should write this way, whatever your opinion is on writing code, just codify it once and for all and save your time and everyone's time repeating over and over. Like, don't put semicolon there, whatever, just hard code that into a linter and that's done forever.
Cool. CI/CD?
CI/CD, so that's obviously one very important piece. There are still people not having CI/CD, so we need to talk about that. Like, have a CI and a CD if you can, like, continuously deploy your things. That's even better. But at least running the tests in your PRs, automate all of that. You won't have to have people. I mean, the goal is to have everything tested automatically when you create a PR, that the whole thing is smooth, that the developer knows they can write code, they can trust their CI to be able to test their work. It's safe to send code basically to your code base, and they are confident that it's going to work if it gets merged and deployed after. That's something very important to build. You want to integrate the quality part of your process into CI directly. So I think like dedicated QA team most of the time, or I mean, Relic of the past, there are exceptions for sure, but you should be able to have your QA team be part basically of the CI maintenance of CI running. Your developer should be able to own that too. I mean, to be responsible for the CI. It's not like CI should not be seen as a problem to merge PR, but as a solution, basically, not something that blocks the merge of PR, but actually empowers people to merge things that work. It allows you to find bugs, avoid regressions, obviously. The more test coverage you have in your code in general, the more CI you run, the easier it is to have a fast time to market, basically to ship things fast, never go back because you actually fixed something and broke the other thing you fixed the day before, which is, horrible. Basically, you're just wasting your time. So that's very something important to take into account and to take care of it. It's one of the most important piece, I think, of the process in the pure merging system. And code coverage. Yeah, I was mentioning that just before, but so I'm not a fan of code coverage in general. Like, I don't even think we use code coverage at Mergify, for example. We just test everything, and I don't know the number of like do we test 95, 99%. It's probably close to 90 something percent. I don't think we run it a lot of the time. So it's good to have, especially if you're starting from zero. And I know there are teams that are starting to build a test suite, a CI, all of that from scratch. So you use code coverage as a guide. Basically, it's a good guideline to say, okay, we have like close to zero. Where do we start? You start with the big obvious things, and then most of the tooling in code coverage can allow you to see what code path you cover with your test. So it's easy to see, like reading your code and seeing what is green and what is red, which parts are not covered, and it's a great way to run once in a while. Or if you have a very very low coverage percentage, to see, okay, which part should I add next? The kind of project solving technical debt, trying to improve the quality of your test and the quantity of your test also. Doing this regularly to make sure that you are close to 100% for sure. Nobody does ever that, I think, because you always have, the or error condition you never see that you wrote code for, but it's very hard to test. So you don't necessarily test for that in a CI, but if you can, sure, go ahead for it. So it's a one tiny thing, I think, code coverage that is great when you start from scratch and from zero. The bigger you get, the less interesting it is, because you know that you have a pretty good code coverage, and you're not going, like, if you add one feature and somebody forgot to write test, it's not going to change the 98%, for example, coverage. So unless you were using very advanced tool, are going to check that, well, this new code is not tested by tests, which some might be able to do. Humans also can also do that, basically doing code reviews, and humans are still better at writing tests that are going to test, the edge cases, all of that you really want to have in your test scenarios.
Agreed. I'm gonna bring this opportunity to bring a question from Perceval. I think it was from earlier, but what about pure coding? Might be more than two devs to replace reviews in some case. This is something that we do sometimes with my co-founder. So we code together, and one is watching the other. I think this is what you mean, Perceval. And I don't think this should replace code reviews. I think you should still review a code like in your own time after, because there's always something you can miss. So yeah, this is my view. I'm curious what you think about this, Julien.
I never did like pure coding, like pair programming, all of that. It's a very weird thing to me, but if people like it, like I like to code, in the dark alone. So I don't want to share that. It's my pleasure. I don't want to share it. So no, I know people even in Mergify does that, and it's great because it's like doing code reviews for me. It's like you share your brain. So I do that at the design level sometimes, and when it's time to get on the keyboard, I like watching somebody typing maybe less faster than me. It's going to be very frustrating for me, so I don't do that. But sure, I think it's a great way to share knowledge again. Somebody's going to think about that, somebody's going to talk about this edge case that you need to take it into account. So it's great, I think. And it may be faster when you have to do code reviews, like you wrote the code with two people, so you can it's like doing yourself code reviews I was mentioning. You do that, both of you, and you have one free code review. That doesn't prevent, I think, other people to review also the code, because you might want to have two pairs of eyes to review the code. But it's maybe a good way to bootstrap and go a little bit faster, and having the back and forth of code reviews, which can add a lot of latency on merging your PR, basically.
Also, I met someone who was working in a company where they only did pure coding like this, and he didn't stay in the company because he was like you. He likes to code on his own and like being able to focus on his own. And I understand that. Cool. Let's talk about Copilot. This is kind of a trend. I don't know if everybody is using it here. I kind of curious. I think I created a poll and I'm gonna launch it now. Let me know if you can see it. And I'm very curious to see who uses a Copilot here. What I particularly like about Copilot is that it not only allows you to create code easily, but it also learns from your code base. So we have some very specific way of creating functions in some part of our code base. And I've seen Copilot being able to do that the same way that we did. And I think this was pretty interesting for us. You can generate code from your code pattern. So when you start like coding, it will like present you some code. And I often find that sometimes it does stupid things, but it allows you to go faster and not having to write like all the tiny details, and you just have to know what you're doing and like correct those stupid things. And it can also generate code from a comment. So you write a comment like generate, like we can see on the screenshot, do a function that sums two numbers, and then it just does it. And I use it sometimes as well like that. I'm going to share my screen differently. So my entire screen, and I wanted to show you how you can use it in different ways. So, for example, I can select this whole function. This is a pretty long one, and I can ask it to make a test. Let's see if this works. So we can see that I'm trying to make it bigger. Yeah. It made the basis of the test with some kind of like test data. And I don't think you should use it as is. The test is not there. It's just the setting in order to call the function. But it allows you to go a little bit faster rather than writing everything yourself. So I kind of use it for these kind of things personally. And the thing that I mentioned earlier, you can make a comment. So in JavaScript, create a function that says hi. Does this work? No, it doesn't. Oh yeah, no. No, it doesn't work right now. I don't know why. But you get the idea. So I'm gonna share my screen again. Yeah, demo effect. So yeah, that's how we use Copilot. Do you want to take that slide, Julien?
Sure. Yeah. So a good person summary that's another very important part. So I think GitHub published a number like during the GitHub Universe keynote last week where they say like something like, don't quote me on that, but I think it's like 40% of the PR don't have any good summary basically, no summary at all. I mean, because people don't write usually what they do in the PR, which sucks. So what actually, I mean, one of the solutions from GitHub is to have Copilot writing PR summaries and that, but I don't think it's a good way. It's an art, I think, to write good commit messages and good pull request bodies and be able to explain not what you're doing and how you're doing it, because any engineer can read the file you modify, the function you touch. I mean, it's on the screen, so don't write about that usually. And that's unfortunately what's I think what most of the AI tools are going to do on that regards, like just reading the code, just like, oh, I'm going to touch this function, so I change this function and this parameter. But I mean, I'm seeing that. But why did you do it? That's very important to actually write why you're doing something, explain that. It's way easier to do that if you're doing very small PR, like we were saying earlier. If you do very large PR, you're going to have to write a book in your pull request body, and that's very long, and nobody wants to also read a book after 500 lines of code change. So don't do that. Um, Picking a convention usually helps. For example, we're using conventional commits at Mergify, so it's very simple in terms of format. Like it's just only for the titles. You have like fix, and then you write what you're fixing, or it could be I don't know, for features or CI for CI changes. It's easy to have this enforced if you want in your repo, and it gives a pretty good overall view of what your PR does in just a snap with the title. Is it a bug fix or something? So use something like that. There's, I think, other conventions, other standard you can use, but it makes it easier than, for example, to parse the Git log and see what should be documented as a change in a change log, for example. If you do that regularly, if it's a CI issue, you don't want that in a change log. If it's a feature, maybe you want it. Writing good commit message also help code reviews. So if you're writing in plain English that this PR does this and add this kind of feature, and then somebody read the code and see that it does the opposite, because that happens. Sometimes you write code that does not do what you think you're going to do. It's easier for people to understand your code, like where you're coming from and what's your intention with the code. If you write that in the pull request body, and they can verify that reading the code. If you don't do that, it's basically impossible, or just reading the title, trying to guess why you're doing that change, and maybe it's correct depending on what you want to do, but it's not really clear. So I think that adding context a lot. Also, if you are fixing a bug at the bug number, if you are working on an incident at the incident number, if you have any kind of link you can use and add in the PR description, can help people understand what you're doing. And I like to say, think about your future you. I spend a lot of time. I've been doing like development for like 20 years, and sometimes I read Julien from 10 years ago, because you like, why did I do that? And you git log like 5 years ago, like, oh, that's why we did that. It's not relevant anymore, or that's a good reason. I forgot about that. If you don't write all the context of what you're doing, and we did that multiple times at Mergify, going back 1 year, 2 years before a change, you using git blame, git log, all of that tooling, which is very powerful. You hate yourself for not having writing commit message saying, why did I do that? I don't remember. There is no ticket. There is nothing. I did that, at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, and I don't remember why. So write this for you. Like, I write this commit messages as a letter to me in the future. Like, dear Julien from the future, here's what I'm doing this change. You will remember. Will not remember, but we'll be able to read that and to understand it. So that's very important to do that for code review, as also for futures Git revert that you will do.
And you're talking about years, but months is more than enough. Like 3 months after coding something, you completely forget about it, and you completely forget the decision, why you made that decision. And I think this is relevant for like any kind of timeline. Cool. We've listed this tool as an automatic PR summary. This is something that we've been using as a GitHub action, and it's a good automatic PR summary. If you're not using GitHub Copilot, I think it does a good job at explaining what you did. And then this is how GitHub Copilot shows how you can create a summary. I wanted to quickly talk about the state of AI code reviews. I've listed 2 main projects that I've seen and that I've tested: ChatGPT Code Review and PR Agent. We've tested them in-house for all our code reviews for a little while, and then it became too noisy, so we stopped using it. I haven't tested it since, and this was a few months ago. I don't know if it got much better, but this is our experience with it so far. I'm curious to know, what are you guys' experiences, and if you're still using it today. And what you can do with those tools usually is have an auto review, like a general review on each file, and they can even have like code suggestions, like you should like change this code, and you can just apply it. And you can even have merge requests on top of this. I think the future will be more of this, but today for us it's been too noisy, and it means it was more noise than things that we implemented, so we just decided to turn it off. But I'm actually curious to test it in the future.
Well, I think a lot of this is going to come with Copilot. If you did not look at the keynote from GitHub Universe, I encourage you to do so. There's a lot of demo of basically they're going to put Copilot everywhere. So you will have a change and you can just select the change and say, explain that to me. And then Copilot just explain you the code. So it's going to be everywhere, like even writing code, fixing security issues, all of that. It's coming everywhere natively in GitHub. And I don't know about the other platforms, but at least for GitHub, it's going to be a solved problem, I guess.
We have a question from I'm not sure I'm gonna say this right, but once, and he's saying which part of the context is relevant in a pull request, commit messages versus having the context in the code base, either in code, config, documentation. Personally, I think it's a good mix of all. I don't try to rely on code comment as much. I try really to have like very descriptive functions name and like variables. Sometimes I do add a code comment personally when there's something that is very like specific. And commit messages, I think I always look at some code and like I see the commit directly in VS Code and I see like why this has been done this way. So I still use this. And on top of this, we also add documentation in a README, like for a specific part of the code, like how to call those functions. So I think I wouldn't rely on just one of those things. I would do everything right because they all have their own kind of use case. Anything to add to this, Julien?
No, I do agree. I mean, I was thinking about like, I mean, I don't believe also in like documenting the code per se. It's always outdated and doesn't work. So it's like documenting the change in the PR is really enough. And then, as you say, like the rest should be self-explanatory. Like, you should be able to read the code and understand it. So I think it's very important to explain why you're doing that in a PR, in a commit message. But the rest, I mean, the problem with like if you're trying to be very two variables, like trying to explain the whole system, the whole architecture change you're doing in a Git log, it's not necessarily the best way. So if it starts to be like too long, maybe you should write a documentation on the side about why the system is so big and so complex. So it should be I don't know, good size, good context. It's a trade-off between being two variables and documenting everything, writing things in the code like going to be outdated. And so it's not about what you're changing code, like going from one place to the other. I think it should be enough, basically.
Cool. So now that we tell you to do code reviews and do pull requests, we're going to tell you like what are the bottlenecks doing pull requests and what what you might experience doing them. So we've listed three main bottlenecks. The first one is review delays. The second one is communication gaps. And the third one is integration and automation issues. So let's start with the review delays. A lot of problems come from busy reviewers. So people are too busy and they cannot review pull requests. And I've seen that in a lot of startups where some reviewers are only the founders or some reviewers are only the senior engineer. I think reviewers should really be everyone in the company because pull requests are not here just to verify that the code is working. It's also an educational tool for people that are like that need to understand the code base, and you need to like give them a chance to ask questions when they need to. And usually in those review delays, the pickup time is really way too long. If it takes more than a day to start looking at your pull request, it's probably too long. And I've seen that in companies. Some pull requests take a few days until like a week to get picked up, and I think this is way too long. We've talked about this, the complexity of change. If the pull request is too long or too complex, it's going to be delaying the pull request for sure. And then the review workflow. Every company has their own kind of workflow, but I've seen that if you assign a reviewer as the creator of the pull request, it makes things so much easier than having a dump channel on Slack where you just say, "Hey, I've done this pull request. Can somebody review it?" And I think this doesn't work so well in most cases. Even though you have like stand up and say like, "Hey, this is my pull request. Nobody has picked it up." Um, I think the notification workflow needs to be really on point, and you shouldn't be notifying too much, but just the right people. And being able to choose your reviewer, I think, is a good practice. Communication gaps. So we talked about it. You need clear PR description. You need a efficient way to give feedback. This is something we haven't touched on so much, but some people don't like being reviewed, or sometimes the messaging doesn't go well. Like you take it personally, and I think this is actually an interesting topic. You should always think that people want the best of you, and you shouldn't think that people are saying this just to nag you. And you should always find ways to do that well, like to give good feedback and to receive good feedback. I think I've seen that adding like not emojis but a meme really helps. Ever since Slack added Giphy, it really helped in like taking feedback per se. And I think also having a good integration with your communication tools, like Axolo does, but we'll show you that later, can really help in closing that communication gap and giving context.
Yeah, let's talk about integration and automation issues. So, I mean, we mentioned that you need to basically automate a lot of the things you want to be like efficient and have a CI that does all of that for you. And it's great, but you will have a ton of little issues. I don't know, I listed 8, maybe it's not enough, but I mean, first you're going to probably rely on multiple tools. So being like your CI, your CD system, which might be different. You might have different CI also depending on what you're going to test. If it's going to be, I don't know, backend code, mobile, and doing, I don't know, Terraform things to deploy things. I mean, it's all going to be different, and you will have to integrate possibly all of that together, which might be complex and not work all the time the way you want. You're going to write tests, and you're going to write them badly sometimes. They're going to work 90% of the time, but fail 10% of the time. And other developer will hate you for that because you will break their test run just because your test doesn't work from time to time. So that's a real pain, basically. You will have resource constraint for sure. I mean, CI is expensive, and the more the more you test, the more you create PR, the more you push revision. I mean, people do code reviews and say, "Oh, you should change that." You change it, and then you push back your code. We run CI, cost money, and you will have to do basically trade off at some point. Whereas your team grows, as your test suite grows, all of that. If you have resource constraint, and you will probably merge conflicts. I mean, the more you have people working on your code base, you will have merge conflict. Not only the merge conflict you will see in GitHub saying, "Oh, you touch that file, the other guys touch that file too." You will also have merge conflicts that you will not see if you don't have a merge queue, which is basically you have somebody renaming something under your feeds, like you import this file in your PR, and in another PR that just got merged in the meantime, they just move the file. And I mean, before that has been merged, your code worked fine, and then you merge it and it doesn't work anymore. Like there's no file being touched in the same PR, but they just move things around. So this kind of conflict is very sneaky, and it breaks your CI, your main branch if you merge without a merge queue. Uh, Debugging CI is the worst. Like usually you cannot replicate your CI system on your laptop. So people will be, "Oh, it works on my laptop. It doesn't work in the CI. It maybe even work in prod, but CI is a different beast." And it's often pretty complicated to, SSH into a CI system, like while it's building. And there's no way to say, "Hey, stop there. I'm just going to SSH into the instance and try to debug the whole." Doesn't work that way. So it's very odd. You can spend hours trying to debug something very silly in the CI that you missed, and you don't have this problem in your laptop, basically. So that's pretty bad. Security is a real issue in CI, which I think is really overlooked in general. you do things in CI, you run scripts, you run sometimes things from the internet that you just, curl something, pipe, SH, the worst. And because that's the way it's documented, it works, you should not do that. But yeah, it's CI, it's not prod, right? But the more you build your CI, the more secrets will go in your CI, the more you will need secrets to deploy that there in this bucket, in this and all of that. And your CI is becoming more and more a target for attacks. So I think a good CI that works, but is also secure, is a real challenge. And the more you're going to add tooling in your CI automation, the more it's going to be complicated to maintain it and to make it scalable. That goes with the size of your team, the size of your code base, obviously. And I was mentioning like difference between prod and CI. Things might work in CI or not work in CI and work or not work in prod. Same for your laptop, basically. CI, depending on how you build them, can be very different from what you run in prod. It's a good practice to actually, for example, if you're using Docker images, to be able to use the same Docker image that you run in prod, that you use in your CI, that you use in your laptop. It makes things way easier to know that you have the same basics, basically, to run your code. Makes it easier to find problem and issues that you might have.
Great, thank you. So now we're gonna make a quick demo, each of us, Julien and I, about our tools. So I'm gonna start with Axolo. And before I make a quick demo, I'm gonna tell you why we exist. And the reason is simple, is we want to help streamline the code review workflow on Slack. And we've realized that we've improved the developer experience by a lot by doing this. And let me show you why. So as we said earlier, code reviews are broken. The time to review is too long, especially cross team. So if you work in a big company and you're trying to get a review on a repo that is touching on a pull request that is touching different repo, sometimes getting a review from a team that you're not used to work with can take days. Most code reviews are not structured, and there's no record of the decision on the pull request. That means maybe you're talking on Slack on a direct message with someone, and all this discussion about the pull request is not being recorded in GitHub because you're just used to talking in Slack rather than on GitHub. We've seen that it's usually high-performing teams that are facing these issues the most. And by high-performing teams, it's usually tech teams where engineers create at least one pull request every day. And this can go up by a lot. It can go up to like 5-10 pull requests every day per engineer. And we think that developers waste at least 2 hours per week coordinating each other just on pull requests. And coordinating means asking for a review, waiting for a pull request to be reviewed, switching priorities. Let's say I'm coding and somebody is asking me a review. I need to review it now, and I'm losing a lot of time doing this. And for a team of 20, that represents the salary of one developer full-time, which is $140,000 per year, which is a lot of money. Usually we see a lot of in-house bots, and those in-house bots, most of them, they have one channel where they get a notification for every new pull request, or sometimes you get more notifications when somebody's adding a reviewer. We've seen a lot of them. They can get pretty noisy, especially if your team is getting bigger. And the problem with it being too noisy is that it's going to get ignored at some point. If it's an in-house bot, it's hard to maintain, and it will probably miss some critical information like deployment, GitHub Actions, etc. So here is our solution. We take all of this information, and for every pull request, we create one channel on Slack. And it makes it easier to get information to the right people. So only the reviewer, the assignee, and the creator will get invited in that channel, and you can get the right notifications. Also, you don't get notified for your own activity. So if I'm sharing a comment on GitHub, I'm not going to be notified from Slack, etc. So as I said, one pull request, one Slack channel. The conversation is saved in GitHub, and also it archived whenever you merge the pull request, so that it doesn't clutter your Slack when you finished. So let's switch to the demo. I'm going to take a few minutes so that Julien can then present Mergify. So you should see my screen. So here on the left, I've prepared a pull request, a test pull request. I'm just modifying the README, so nothing huge, but it should be enough for you to see how this works. And what you see on the right is a Axolo general channel. So this is a common, like one notification per channel, but those notifications get updated. So we see different colors. They have a status. So this one has been merged. And this one is a pull request that Arthur made earlier. It's mergeable because I've approved it, and there's a channel to it. So now what I'm going to do is create a pull request, and it will create a notification here on my behalf, and it's going to create a channel automatically. So it created a notification here, and there's a channel. So let's go in that channel and see what we have. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So it added Arthur because we have a code owner, and it added Arthur automatically. So it added him, and now I'm gonna just write a comment here, like hey from Slack, and it should appear, yeah, right here. So here it write on GitHub on my behalf with the Axolo bot, and I can even edit that on GitHub, and this will edit on Slack. Oh, Arthur just approved the pull request. We can see the edit from GitHub. It's been edited on Slack, and I can do that on both sides. So I can edit it from Slack. It's fully integrated both way. We can see that this has been updated here. We have a bunch of bookmarks. So those bookmarks represent the bookmarks that you see in GitHub here. I can see the diff, and the checks are running. So let's go and check out those checks. So yeah, they're still running. I'm gonna get a notification whenever they pass, or if one of them fell. So this will probably come later. Now let's check the diff and imagine that I want to make a code comment. So I'm doing a code comment from GitHub. I'm adding a single comment. This will appear here. And I can see the code comment. It tells me the file. I can open this in GitHub directly, or I can choose to create a code comment thread in here, and this will appear in GitHub directly. Some take longer than others. Yeah, it's here. So yeah, it's pretty simple. We found that this really helps people in bringing context. You know, you don't have to say, hey, Arthur, here's the link to the pull request. Have you had time to review it? And the fact that you have the channels all here that come into this channel section, it's like a to-do list that you know you need to do, and you can easily go to it. And we found that people that use Slack a lot, they like having all the conversations in one place. So yeah, happy to take any question if you have. And let's close this pull request because I'm not going to merge this. And you will see that this will get archived automatically. So it got archived. Now I'm moved to another channel. And if I go back to the Axolo general, I can see the status has been closed, even though Arthur approved this pull request. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll happily take them. I've got a question from Scott. Can you approve the PR from Slack, and how if yes? So yes, you can do it. We have a /LGTM command, and you can add an optional comment.
That's cool.
Cool. Yeah, Julien, maybe you want to share your screen for the presentation and then.
Sure. Let me do that. Can I try my demo window? I'm not sure I can put that into.
On the top right, you have a present mode.
Which one is it?
Slideshow. Yeah, presenter view.
No, it puts me into full screen, right?
Yeah.
Not sure what
you
you're
can,
seeing.
if you click on slideshow and then presenter view, I think this should be enough. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me find the right. Yeah, so I'm going to to talk a bit about Mergify, what we do, what we offer basically in terms of value, and also show you a bit one of the use cases you could solve with Mergify. There is a ton of those, but I'm going to show you one that I mentioned earlier. So basically, the goal of Mergify is to automate everything in your dev process, in your PR process, from basically having your PR created, making sure they're correctly labeled, reviewed, approved, all of that. The goal is to remove friction for your developer so they can write rules that are going to automate everything. And the other part that we're trying to solve is also having a merge queue, which is basically to making sure that what you merge is correctly tested, up to date, and that you can merge those efficiently and be sure basically that what you're going to deploy after your merge is correct and works 100% of the time. The way we do that is with 3 different products that we have. One is workflow automation. I'll show you just after what it looks like briefly. Merge queue, I will demo that at the end, showing what a merge queue is and how it works, which is pretty simple. And another product that we are actually building is CI monitoring, which allow you basically to treat your CI issue as a first-class citizen. Workflow automation is very simple to understand for any engineer. It's like you have all of these kind of tiny things you want to do in a repo for your PRs, which is, for example, automatically merging a PR. If you're using Dependabot to update your libraries to get security updates to your code, you have this ton of PRs that are going to be created every day or week, depending on how you use Dependabot. And you can write a rule to tell Mergify that this PR should be automatically merged basically as soon as the CI passes. The author is Dependabot, obviously. And you can also put a schedule, for example, make sure that you merge during office hours and not merge dependency updates on a Sunday. If you have a continuous deployment after, should be pretty bad. You could merge this PR. So based on this kind of this small YAML based language, you can write such a rule in 5 lines. It's very easy. It's easy to write. It's easy to understand. When you have new engineers joining your team, it's easy for them to go into this file, which is in your repository, to understand what the process is. So you can codify anything you can codify. For example, if you're using branch protection in GitHub, very few settings to mandate, like you have to have 2 reviews, etc. It's very hard to have very fine-grained review system, for example, where you want to have, I don't know, 1 people from this team, 1 people from this team, and all these kind of conditions, basically, you can write in YAML in a few lines with our workflow system. So a merge queue, if you're not familiar with it, the idea is really to be sure that what you merge is working. The default in GitHub is that you can create a PR and test it with your CI and merge it 1 month later if you want. The problem is when you merge a PR 1 month later, while things have moved, like the branches have moved, like I was saying, maybe file have been renamed, maybe a new CI has joined, maybe new test has been added to the CI, but you run the CI 1 month before. So you need to be sure before you merge the PR that it is up to date with its base branch, that it is retested, and then it is merged. And that's what a merge queue does, basically. When you want to merge something, you don't merge it right away. You put it into the queue, and when it's first in the queue, Mergify update the PR, retrigger the CI, make sure it still works, and then merge the PR, and then move on to the next PR into the queue. That's why we call that a merge queue. It's a queue of PR that are ready to be merged, and I want to be sure that when you merge them, they're okay. You don't even have to run. A lot of people run their CI after they merge, like they run the CI of the main branch. You don't need to do that anymore, because what you merged is actually what is going to be into main, and you tested that before merging the PR. So it's safer. I mean, it's the safest system that you can have, and you don't have to rerun your CI before deploying. You can just merge and then deploy right away. Obviously, there's a ton of options you can add on the merge queue, like priorities, merging the PR in the right order, all of that, having multiple queues, different settings, all of that. Batches of PR, and I will show that just after in the demo, which is a pretty cool way to, for example, save CI time. CI monitoring is something we're still building, so I'm going to be brief on that. But our idea is that engineers spend too much time reading their logs and trying to understand if the CI failure they just saw is their problem or something else, a CI problem, a flaky test from another team or whatever. It's basically wasting time, and we know that we can automate a lot of that basically, and treating CI problem as first-class citizens. There are a lot of problems in CI like flaky tests that are ignored until they are a real problem, and there's too many of them and you can't merge anything anymore. So you want to be sure that there is a life cycle of this problem being handled from it exists to it's been solved. And we are building a tool basically at Mergify trying to solve all of that. We've made a study recently on basically what people think of Mergify. Did it change their lives? Yes. I mean, the summary is it does improve a lot the time people spend on managing their PR. They don't have to rebase their PR manually. They don't have to do a lot of things they used to do manually. As an engineer, we want people to be able to focus on writing code and creating a PR, doing code reviews, and that's it. That's where humans have value. The rest could be automated. It should be automated and be done automatically. So I'm going to show you what it looks like to have a merge queue. Let me create first a bunch of PR. So I have a local script which I'm running right now, which creates 3 PRs. They're all a bit out of date, so there are a few commits beyond the main branch. Okay, so I have my 3 PRs. I have a fake CI, obviously, on my PR, which is going to run. So the way Mergify works is that we report everything in GitHub. You can see that there. There's a little summary that is being posted where Mergify is going to tell you what it's going to do with this PR, if you have any kind of automation, for example, any kind of rules. Everything is in GitHub. Why? We don't want people to have, like developers, to have back and forth between our dashboard, for example, and GitHub. So they can just do everything in GitHub. Like Sydney was mentioning, people like using Slack. Developers don't want to leave Slack or GitHub, basically. They're happy to spend their all day in that. So you don't have to go to Mergify dashboard to see what Mergify is doing. So this PR is supposedly working, and the other two. I'm going to add those, not merge them right away, because I'm not sure they work together. I'm going to put them into the queue, and rather than testing them one by one into the queue, I'm going to put them into a special queue that I name batch, which tests everything in a batch. So the way it works is that Mergify is going to create a branch with the free PR merge, and it's going to run the CI on top of this branch. And if it works, it's going to merge the free PR. There are 2 ways to put PR into the queue. One, which is manual. I'm doing that there. But you could also use the automation system that I talked about in workflow automation to write a rule that says, well, if the PR is approved and as the CI passing and I don't know, it's Monday, just put that into the queue automatically. And last one. So if I go back to the first PR, I got a reply from Mergify saying this PR is the first in the queue. And I have all the details that I need to be merged. Basically, I need my CI to pass. If I go there on my dashboard, I have a batch configured to be 5 PR. I only put 3 PR into it, so I'm going to start the batch anyway with 3 PRs rather than 5, or maybe 2, because the third one didn't actually was not in time for it, so it's going to be only 2. And if I go to GitHub, here I'll see my first batch of 2 PRs being created with my 2 PR in it. And there I'm going to run the CI again on these 2 PR combined together and making sure that they actually work together. So if, for example, one PR had a test that is going to break the other PR, I will detect that before managing any of the 2 PR. In my case, the CI is going to work because it's a very phony CI, which just sleeps for 30 seconds. And as soon as the CI returns success, Mergify is going to merge the 2 original PR and go on with the third PR that I added, which will be alone. It's in its batch then because it missed the right time. So doing that is first a great way to make sure that your PR works together. First, there's also pretty cool side effect to that if you use a merge queue in batch. I was mentioning that CI costs a lot of money. Basically, when you have, for example, unit tests, which are pretty cheap, they run for a few minutes, it's fine to run those on every PR, right? But when you have functional tests that take, let's say, 2 hours to run and test a bunch of systems, you can't really run them on every PR, right? Each time. It's like too much money. So what you could do with a merge queue is say, I'm only going to run the unit tests and the basic tests that are cheap on the PR itself. So it's a great to have this kind of fast feedback loop from the developer. It's cheap to run those. But when the PR is ready to be merged, I'm going to put this PR in the queue, batch them, and in the batch, run the functional test that takes 2 hours. So I'm going to test PR 5 by 5 or 10 by 10, 10 by 10 over the functional system. And it's going to cost you much less CI time, basically, and less money of CI to be able to batch all of these PR together. There are a lot of other use cases and optimization you can do, obviously, with your merge queue. It's a pretty simple demo in that case, but you can imagine from that everything that should be possible to do. And that's it. And I'll take any question also.
I have a question for you. What is your ideal customer? Like, who is using Mergify to its fullest? What kind of
That's a
size
good
of
question.
company?
So it's not really about the size. So people often think it's like, well, we're too small for that. So the way we built Mergify with Medi 5 years ago, we were a team of 3 people working on an open source project. So 3 people is enough to use Mergify. The thing is, if you want to be correct in what you merge, you want to use that. The common theme around our customers, like they like automating and they have a very good CI and very good CD. They want to basically test things right and make sure they can test it works, they merge, they deploy. So if you don't deploy like every day or 10 times a day, usually you're not a good customer. If you have a ton of flaky tests, like it's a mess in your CI and nothing works, but this is not going to improve the situation because we're going to run more tests and test more things and make it even more sure that it works. So we are going to kick out your PR from the queue because you have flaky tests, basically. So these are not like good candidates for us. Most of our customers have a good hygiene, I would say, of CI and are targeting to have a very smooth process where they can have good PRs, test, merge, and deploy.
Cool, thank you. Could have this question. Assuming you use your tools internally, what are some problems you have? Either new ones or old ones, stuff you want to fix.
I'll answer that, I guess. Yes, obviously we use our tools internally. I mean, it's your own dog food, right? I don't think we have any problem internally. Like basically, we are in a way where we are our own good customers. So we are discovering, I think, since the last 2 years, new problems that other team have, but the bigger team have bigger issues. Like our CI is still small compared to a lot of CI from our customers, obviously. So I think we don't have much. We solved all of the easy problem we had basically. When you use your tool on a daily basis, it's easy to do that, and then you start at the same time exploring what your customers have issues. And the way we build Mergify is to make sure that you use the YAML. It's basically very, very, very easy to build that to fit your workflow. So there is nothing built in terms of workflow. You can adapt it to any workflow. We don't have two teams, two customers using it the same way. So that's pretty cool because you can really adapt it to your needs and you'll have to change the way your team works. So, yep.
Yeah, maybe I can answer that as well. So yeah, we do use our tool internally, even though we're a team of just two. And I think one of the problem that I see that I would like to change is that all the channels are created in the same section in Slack. And I know Slack will bring a way to have an API for sections. So if you have a lot of PR that you're involved in, let's say like 5 to 10 PR, you would see like 10 channel. But I think this is good because you see all the channels that need work and you can see straight in Slack. But ideally, I want to have those channels, like the one that require my review in a separate section from the one that I've created myself. So this is something that we'd like to solve in the future. One of the problems that appeared. But yeah, that's it. Cool. Any other question? Great. I think we don't have any more questions. Well, thank you so much for attending, and we'll post this video online and share it with you if you want to share it with your friends or see it again. Cool.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.